Buying a foreclosure could be a disaster. Countless and overlooked mistakes, hidden and unforeseen costs can cost you thousands of dollars, not to mention stress. However, if you know what to avoid and where to look, you can make a whole lot of money. My name's Wayne Turner. For nearly 30 years, I've done just about everything when it comes to real estate, buying, flipping, selling. I've sold thousands of properties and helped a lot of people purchase properties. I'm going to show you in this video exactly what to do, how to do it, and how to avoid the costly mistakes, 13 if you will, when it comes to buying any kind of distressed property. Now, number one, you want to get the house inspected. Whether it be condo, townhome, house, whatever it may be, have it inspected. Now, a lot of people say, Wayne, I'm a contractor, I'm a subcontractor, I'm just going to inspect it myself. Well, listen, I can tell you a quick story. Had a contractor buy a house one time. He did his own inspection because he's a contractor, right? I'm extremely handy. I've been around construction since I was 4 years old. My whole entire life, since I can have a conception of a memory, I've been around and in construction. However, if you don't know what to look for, so this gentleman bought a house, foreclosure, and unfortunately they had poured concrete down the drain. So you know that Quick concrete that you see at Lowe's and Home Depot and Ace Hardware? Yeah, people get frustrated, and it may not have been the homeowner, but somebody poured concrete down the drains and then turned the water on. Yeah, you guessed it. It took over $20,000 at the contractor's cost to replace the plumbing in the house just because he bought it anyway and didn't look in the drains. Now, number two is to get a survey, or at the very least, look at a copy of the survey. And it doesn't matter if it's on a large piece of property like the one I'm walking on right now, or just a small lot. You want to make sure that there's no encroachments or encumbrances, no servitudes, no right-of-ways, none of that stuff. And if there is, you need to just know it so you can be okay with it. Because the last thing you want to do is to buy a piece of property and you're going to turn around and flip it, or you're going to hold it as an investment, or you're going to live in it. Irregardless, you don't want somebody coming and knocking on the door, or all of a sudden you see them, why are they coming down my driveway? Well, they've got a shared driveway because there's a servitude, or they've got an easement to go across your property to get to their property. So either get a survey or find a recent recorded survey so you know that that what's going on with that property, you're okay with it before you purchase it. Now, before you jump in and avoid any mistakes, you got to find a property, right? So you go to findmyforeclosure.com. Findmyforeclosure.com gives you access to short sales, tax sales, bankruptcy sales, foreclosures, you name it. Findmyforeclosure.com. It is a paid site. It's not free. I pay for it. I think it's a great site to find absolutely everything when it comes to distressed property. Now, if you need a lender, you need to get approved. A lot of these foreclosures, you can actually buy through the USDA Rural Development Program. Once again, there's no cost and no obligation, and findmyforeclosure.com is a win when it comes to finding these deals. All right, number three is talk to the neighbors. I can't tell you enough how helpful it is to talk to the neighbors. Get out, walk around, ask the neighbors, has there ever had a tree fall on the property? Is it ever flooded? Is there anything that could go wrong, should go wrong, that has gone wrong with the neighborhood or anything like that? Because the neighbor will gladly tell you, yeah, that house got 2 foot of water last month, or yeah, there was a tree that fell on that house, or yeah, it got struck by lightning twice. You just want to know that stuff, and it's free information. So before you purchase not just a distressed property or a foreclosure property, it's always a good idea just to kind of get out, walk the neighborhood, and ask neighbors what they think about the property and why they thought the person was selling it. All right, number four is flood zones. You need to make sure that if that property's in a flood zone, you're okay with it being in a flood zone, and has it ever flooded? So you just need to know that. And there's flood zones A, B, C, and X. If you're in flood zone A, that's the most likely for it to flood. If you're in flood zone X, that's the least likely for it to flood. Now, if you're in flood zone X, flood insurance is not required by a mortgage lender or a bank. If you're in flood zone B or C, it's not required. But if you're in flood zone A and you get a loan, that mortgage lender that loans you the money on that asset, that structure, that house, whatever it may be, they're going to require that flood insurance be on that property. And it can be into the thousands of dollars. And you may be okay with it. Maybe you're buying this fixer-upper or foreclosure, whatever it may be, and you're thinking, well, that's no big deal. I'm only going to have it for 6 weeks. You always have to think about resale, because you need to get a quote on that property and what it's going to cost, because that can make or break whether or not somebody buys it sooner better than later, and it costs you a whole lot of money in holding cost. All right, number 5 is insurance claims. You can actually call your homeowner's insurance or an insurance company, if you will, and ask them, has there ever been a claim filed on that property? Believe it or not, they can see if there's been claims filed on that property. Maybe the house has been struck by lightning 3 times, or maybe it's had a tree fall on it. You just need to know that stuff up front, because it gets extremely challenging and difficult to find that stuff out when the bank owns the property. Because you have to understand, when a property is sold by the bank, banks are exempt from filling out the property condition disclosure form because they've never resided in the property. They've basically taken the property back from the person that used to live in it. As a result, you don't know anything about it, the age of the roof, the water heater, any of that stuff. That's why it's so important to get a home inspection. It's also important to make sure you get insurance quotes and make sure there hasn't been tremendous amount of claims on the property, because that can make or break the next person that comes along to insure that property. All right, number 6 is check that thing for mold. You got to check the property for mold if you remotely smell any kind of moisture in the house itself. You have to understand that many properties that are foreclosure, distressed properties, they've been sitting for a while. And it's not just they hadn't been on the market for a while, it's just oftentimes from the time the bank takes the property back, from the time it actually gets on the market, can be anywhere from 6 months to a year. As a result, the house sits dormant, meaning that they winterize it so the pipes won't freeze in the winter months, but they don't do anything whatsoever as far as turning on electricity or any of that. So that's why when you walk into a house and it's a foreclosure, it kind of smells musty. If it smells real musty and real mildewy, if you will, mildew, is that a word, mildewy? But if you smell that, it may have been a previous leak. So it's not a bad idea to get it actually inspected. There's companies that come out, they put these machines around the house, and literally within a couple of hours, they take that data, they send it off to be tested. Within 3 days, they'll tell you if mold is in the house, if mildew's in the house, and then how much of it is in the house. And most importantly, the highest point in the home of where it's coming from, so you can know, okay, I have to address it or I'm not buying this house. Now, number 7 is, quite frankly, you just need to know what the home's going to be worth after you fix it up and then before you fix it up. So are you overpaying for the property? Oftentimes a foreclosure as is deal, it's not necessarily a good deal if you have to make all these improvements to it. And it has a lot to do whether or not you're going to buy and hold and live in it, or if you're going to buy and flip the property. If you're going to buy and flip, you're going to have holding costs. It may be 3 or 4 months, maybe 5 months. If you're buying it to live in, you don't have those holding costs, but you still want to know what is the value today and what will the value be in the future. Now, if you're getting a loan, the bank's going to require that this asset, this structure, be appraised to determine and make sure that the value is actually there, that you're willing to pay for it, and they're going to give you a loan against it. You also need to know the future value. So how you do that is you can contact a real estate agent and they can kind of give you a good idea. But for the most part, if you really want a true estimate of the future value of the property based on the amenities and the things you're going to do to the property, the improvements that you're going to make, if you will, it's best to hire an appraiser. Show that appraiser the list of all the improvements. I'm going to put in a fence, I'm going to replace the cabinets, I'm going to replace the flooring, the carpet, the roof, whatever it may be, with an estimate, and then ask them to give you a future value. Now, number 8 is title, making sure there's clear title of the property. A structure, property, land has a deed and a title, and you need to make sure there's no back taxes, liens, encumbrances, or anything on the title. Now, if it's owned by a bank and listed with a real estate brokerage firm, most of the time they've already done their homework and made sure there's no back taxes, liens, encumbrances, second mortgages, and all that, right? However, if you buy houses from individuals and you don't know that, or if you buy them even from a sheriff's sale, oftentimes they can have a second and third mortgage on those properties. So you just need to make sure that when you purchase it, it's got a clear deed and clear title. Now, number 9, and this is nothing that you have to do because you certainly don't need a real estate agent to buy a piece of property. But I always say number 9 is have an agent that you trust, have somebody that you can connect with, ask them how many years they've been in the business, what experience that they have, how many transactions they've closed. Repetition's the mother of learning. The more you've done anything in life, it doesn't matter, the better you get at it. So it's best to have somebody good like that in your corner. Whenever you have questions, you can bounce ideas off of, and they can look at a property. A good one can look at a property in a neighborhood and say, yeah, that's a win or that's not. That's good or that's not. And a good real estate agent will know neighborhoods like the back of their hand. If you need help with that, go to contactwayne.com. We can connect you with an agent in your area. Now, number 10, quite simply, is overpaying for the property. You don't want to get too emotionally connected or attached to the property. And believe it or not, it's easier said than done. especially when you have multiple offers on the property. And listen, if you like these videos, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. It helps me produce more videos like this because I just quite frankly need to know what people need to know about. I've been doing this for 30 years and I love teaching and sharing with people. You don't want to get too emotionally involved when it comes to the price. It doesn't matter if you're buying and flipping, holding, investment, you're going to live in it. You just want to make sure you don't overpay for the property. And I always tell people, don't be afraid to make an offer. The answer is always no unless you ask. But it's so easy to get tied up or caught up in them if there's multiple offer situations, because they'll put a house on the market and they'll say, all the bids make your highest and best on this before this date, right? And you just put your highest and best foot forward and say, look, this is what I'm willing to give, and that's it. Because you'd be surprised. I've seen people buy houses and then they've overpaid and they didn't make their money when they bought. They lost their money when they bought. Now, number 11 is you don't want to get too fancy with the fixtures or anything as far as improvements to the property, because when you start looking at plumbing and lighting and cabinets and flooring, all of that stuff starts to add up. So it's important to look around in the neighborhood and make the house match the neighborhood. Should you paint the brick or should you just let it be? Should you do flooring inside? Should you do carpet? Can you get away with luxury vinyl? It has a lot to do with whether or not you're going to live in the property, or if you're going to rent the property, or if you're going to flip the property. But I always tell people, keep that in mind when it comes to making an offer on a property. That way you don't overspend on that property. You make your money when you buy, but you can sure get rid of it just by buying real fancy stuff. Number 9 is after you've bought the house, start with the outside to improve the property itself. And here's why. It gives you a head start, a bump in time frame, if you will, when it comes to marketing, promotion, and advertising of the property. If you're buying that property to flip it or to rent it, this gives you an advantage because you start on the outside. You put a sign in the yard, you make it look pretty, you put gutters, whatever you're going to do to the outside. You got it spruced up, new landscaping, pressure washed, all that stuff. The cleanest house is always going to be the next one to sell. But it creates curiosity, and when you do that, you're going to get more people to look at it, more people interested in it. You're going to get neighbors to actually help you sell the property. And if you're buying it to live in it, that's the quickest way to get to know your neighbors. So start with the outside in mind. They're going to love it because they're going to see that you actually bought this foreclosure that's in rough shape and you're making improvements to that property. Now, number 13 is HOAs, homeowners associations. You need to know, is it in a homeowners association? Are there any back dues to the association? What are the deed restrictions and covenants to the association? Because if you're going to make any improvements to that property, you need to know that. Believe it or not, there's a lot of that stuff in the deed restrictions, and you don't want somebody knocking on your door saying, hey, you can't paint the house that color. You also want to make sure there's no special assessments. Oftentimes, a lot of townhomes, condos, if they've had to replace all the roof, there's not enough money in the budget, they'll do a special assessment, and you'll have to pay more for the next 2 to 3 months or maybe even a year. You just don't want to get stuck holding the bag that's not budgeted. And you certainly don't want to have something kind of over your head, if you will, when it comes to selling that property, because now you got to transfer that special assessment, if you will, onto the next buyer, and that just rubs people the wrong way. So listen, that's the 13. Finding, buying, fixing foreclosures, distressed properties. Go to findmyforeclosure.com. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. Leave me a comment. Until next time, make it a great day.